All right, good afternoon. I'm Colleen Pepler and I serve as the chair for the Colorado Ag Commission. And we thank you for joining today's Emergency Ag Commission meeting. I call this meeting to order at 12:31 on April 30th, 2024. Ag Commission members, I will go down the roll call and please unmute yourself and say present when you hear your name. Ag Commission Vice Chair Simon Martinez. Ag Commission Member Catherine Bedell. Ag Commission Member David Block.
Present.
Ag Commission Member Jeffrey McCullough.
Present.
Ag Commission Member Roberto Meza.
Present.
Ag Commission Member Elena Miller. Ag Commission Member Harrison Top.
Present.
Ag Commission Member Nick Trainer.
Present.
We have reached a quorum and can now proceed on with our meeting. At this time, I would ask for a commission member to make a motion to approve today's meeting agenda.
Madam Chair, this is,
David?
Go ahead, David.
sorry. Madam Chair, this is David. I will make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Thank you, David. David has given a motion to approve today's meeting agenda. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you for the second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve today's meeting agenda. All those in favor, please say aye or signal on your computer by raising a thumb or a hands up.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. So today's meeting is being recorded and will be available to view online at the CDA YouTube channel. The public can join today's Ag Commission meeting through the Zoom webinar. This is an emergency meeting in which the business of the Ag Commission is solely to review and recommend to the Commissioner of Agriculture the adoption of an emergency rule that will be contained within the livestock disease control. This emergency rule is meant to address the preservation of public health, safety, and welfare as it relates to the emerging presence of highly pathogenic avian influenza in dairy cattle. There will be a time for public comment at the end of the meeting. Please note 3 important matters. First, this is not a rulemaking hearing, so your comments will not be considered as they would be if this were a rulemaking hearing. Second, if the department finds a need to adopt a permanent rule, there will be a formal rulemaking process. Third, this opportunity to comment is not a question and answer session. The department will host a town hall for the general public in the near future to provide public awareness and allow for questions and answers. Before we proceed, I want to review some guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Each time you speak, please identify yourself. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation. I would like now to turn it over to Dr. Maggie Baldwin to explain the emergency rule.
Thank you, Colleen. Good afternoon, Ag Commission members and members of the public. I'm Maggie Baldwin. I'm the State Veterinarian and Director of the Animal Health Division at the Colorado Department of Agriculture. As Ag Commission members are very aware, we have been together recently in the past several weeks to discuss highly pathogenic avian influenza at the last Ag Commission meeting. For the last 2 years, we have been dealing with high path AI response in Colorado and across the nation. In fact, just over 2 years ago, we held a previous emergency rulemaking related to high path avian influenza, and that had been specific to poultry shows and fairs. Over the last several weeks and month, we've seen a tremendous amount of updates and developments with high path avian influenza response across Colorado and across the nation. High path avian influenza is a reportable disease in the state of Colorado. It is reportable to the state veterinarian's office. We've seen impacts of high-path avian influenza in poultry over the last 2 years. And as you've heard recently, we now have seen highly pathogenic avian influenza positively detected in dairy cattle. As of yesterday, the United States Department of Agriculture has confirmed high-path avian influenza in dairy cattle in 34 dairy herds across 9 states, including Colorado. Last week, USDA issued a federal order, which went into effect yesterday. In order for us in Colorado to implement the requirements in that federal order, as well as protect the health and safety of Colorado's livestock and poultry industries, we are today going over the emergency rulemaking to implement these requirements. And Ari, I believe you are going to bring up the emergency rule, and the draft emergency rule is also being posted. So I'll give a summary of what these emergency requirements are. And let me just get my notes oriented correctly. So the intent of USDA's emergency rule is to require testing of lactating dairy cattle moving interstate. We will not be adding any additional requirements beyond the federal order with our emergency rule. So I'm going to go over a few of the highlights for this rule. Prior to interstate movement, lactating dairy cattle are to receive a negative test for influenza A virus at an approved National Animal Health Laboratory Network lab. This sample has to be collected by an accredited veterinarian, a licensed veterinarian, or a sample collector that's approved by state animal health officials. The sample collection and testing must take place no more than 7 days prior to interstate movement. Lactation status and the negative test results must be recorded on the certificate of veterinary inspection. Non-clinical lactating dairy cattle moving interstate directly to slaughter do not require a pre-movement test, but must move on a certificate of veterinary inspection or other documentation that's approved by sending and receiving states. Clinically affected lactating dairy cattle or lactating dairy cattle from herds that test positive for high-path avian influenza are ineligible for interstate movement. Owners of dairy herds in which dairy cattle test positive for high-path AI are required to provide epidemiological information, including animal movement tracing, to state animal health officials and to USDA. And in Colorado, testing for highly pathogenic avian influenza in cattle may only be completed at a National Animal Health Laboratory Network. Any positive result must be reported to the state veterinarian's office. Colleen, that is the overview of the emergency rule, and I'd be happy to pause there and see if the Ag Commission members have any questions.
Yes, Dr. Baldwin, this is Jeff McCullough. Why is it only limited to dairy cattle?
Yeah, Jeff, very good question. So at this point in time, we've only seen clinical disease in dairy cattle. USDA is doing additional testing to see if there is any additional disease present in any of our other livestock commodities. But right now, at this point in time, it seems that the virus has a predilection for dairy cattle, specifically a predilection for mammary tissue and milk. Why, we don't know yet. We don't quite understand the mechanism of transmission. We don't quite understand a few of the pieces that we're waiting on some additional testing, but right now this does seem to be specific to dairy cattle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Dr. Baldwin? David?
Yes, just a curiosity here. Who will be in charge of making sure all dairies and dairy farms, if you will, get this message, and if they will know who the national organizations are that they need to get these tests to?
Yeah, really good question, David. Thanks for that question. So a couple of pieces. One, we've been communicating very regularly with all of our industry partners. So that includes our dairy partners, also on our livestock associations, and distributing this message. This message is going out nationally as well. Here in Colorado, we have our field veterinarians that have been in touch with a number of the dairies, a number of markets across our state, relaying this information. This afternoon, we are hosting a town hall specifically for producers and veterinarians. And we have a lot of folks that are signed up to join that, and we'll be providing the specific guidance for producers and veterinarians on that sample collection and submission. We will also be working with our PIO and some other agency partners to host a public town hall. So that will be separate. This afternoon's town hall is specific for producers and veterinarians. So we'll be getting the guidance out that way. We also have put together specifically a web page for dairy cattle and high path AI. So as soon as we get this additional guidance put together, that'll be posted on our dairy cattle high path AI webpage. Did that answer your questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to acknowledge that we do have two additional commission members who have joined us, Simon Martinez and Elena Miller. So I just want to acknowledge that they are in our attendance.
Dr. Baldwin, I have another question for you. So a lot of these dairies they have their calves raised at like a third-party calf ranch type facility. Are those facilities subject to this, or how are you tracking those secondary sources?
Yeah, so this emergency rule and USDA's federal order right now only applies to the testing for interstate movement for lactating dairy cattle. So calves and heifers at this point in time, or bulls, would not be required to be tested, or dry cows for that matter. This is specific to lactating dairy cattle at this point in time. The other thing that I would also just like to mention to the Ag Commission is we're still learning a lot with high path AI in dairy cattle. There's still a lot that USDA is looking at. There's a lot that our state and other federal partners are looking at. And so if we need to update our emergency rule or modify, make changes, we'll get the whole team back together again in the event that we learn new information or learn information about the risk posed from some of those other classes of cattle.
Dr. Baldwin, I've got one more question for you. Can you give us an estimate, and maybe you don't know this, what the cost burden is to some of this testing for these dairies?
So good question. USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, is covering the cost of testing at the National Animal Health Laboratory Network labs. What they're not covering is the cost of shipping or the veterinary expenses associated with completing those tests. But the actual testing itself is being covered by USDA.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Baldwin?
Dr. Baldwin, this is Simon Martinez. Is that every area that has these cows going to be tested?
So this is specific for any lactating dairy cattle moving interstate, so moving across state lines. The federal order from USDA applies across the whole US. In order for us to successfully implement those requirements here in Colorado, emergency rule was the best way for us to go.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
This is Roberto. Dr. Baldwin, I have a question on possibility for reinfection after recovery. Is that something that's going to be ongoing that we have to mitigate, or are we still learning more about it?
Yeah, good question. And we don't know that at this time. We have to wait a little bit longer, give us a little bit more time for USDA to do some additional diagnostic testing and research for some of those earlier herds that were impacted. And Colleen,
see
I see
Billy.
that Billy's got his hand up.
I do too.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Billy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Baldwin, I was wondering if you could discuss a little as to what constitutes the public health, safety, and welfare to justify the emergency basis of this.
Yeah, thanks, Billy, for that. So this is really a novel situation. We've not seen highly pathogenic avian influenza present this way before in dairy cattle. And what is a bit not entirely understood and a bit concerning is the mechanism of transmission. So we are seeing movement of highly pathogenic avian influenza to other dairy herds, within herds and to other dairy herds. The good news is on the dairy cattle side is while they do appear to be clinically affected and their production of milk is impacted, dairy cattle seem to be recovering from this disease. But it also poses a significant risk of disease transmission to our poultry flocks. And in a number of other states, they have had suspected cases where it has had lateral transmission of disease from dairy farms to poultry farms. And that is really concerning. The other potential concern that we have and why we coordinate very closely with our public health partners is that, as you all know, avian influenza is a potential zoonotic disease. And so continuing to monitor and diagnose these herds and these flocks that are impacted is really important to not only protect our food security, but our public health. Billy, did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Are there any other questions from the Ag Commission? Seeing none, then I will entertain a motion for this emergency ruling.
I will make a motion that we move that the commission recommend the commissioner adopt the emergency revisions to the livestock disease control as proposed.
Thank you, Simon. I've had a motion. Do I have a second to this?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Nick.
Trainer.
I've had a motion. I've had a second for this motion. Is there any discussion? If none, then we will proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please respond by saying aye or raising your hand, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. I am going to back. Elena took her hand down. Good. Okay. Motion has passed. Thank you. All right, we're going to move forward for the opening of public comment for this Emergency Ag Commission meeting. We're at that point now for this agenda piece. I would like to invite members of the public to share any comments. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per individual, and we will take questions up to 12:59 p.m. As a reminder, CDA will be hosting a town hall on high pathi in dairy cattle for the general public in the near future. Once CDA details are finalized, we will include folks that registered for today's Emergency Ag Commission meeting in our notification. Again, public comment is for comments only and not a question and answer session. If you do have questions, please direct them to the Q&A. Although questions will not be answered during today's meeting, they will be passed along to the State Veterinarian and Animal Health Division and will help inform the town hall on high pathi and dairy cattle for the general public. Ari, please let me know if there's anyone in the queue to address the commission.
There is no one currently in queue to address the commission.
Okay. Seeing none, this concludes this emergency meeting today for the Colorado Department of Ag. I would like to remind you all that we do have our next commission meeting in Ray, Colorado on May 15th at the Cobblestone Inn and Suites from 9 to 3. If there is no other discussion on today's agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. I've had a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Harrison. There's been a motion and a second to adjourn today's meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of adjourning today's emergency session of the Colorado Department of Ag Commission meeting, please say aye or raise your hand or a signal on your computer.
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Same sign. Meeting has been adjourned. Motion has passed. Thank you so much for your time today, and we will see you all in May. And thank you, Dr. Baldwin.
Thank you, commission members. Take care.
Thank you.
Hey, Colleen, there's a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A at the bottom.
And
Yes, I
are
was just gonna say that we missed some questions that were in the chat.
so today's meeting was for comment only. Those questions will be taken and will be sent along to the state veterinarian and the animal health division. So those questions will be addressed. Okay,
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you. You bet. You
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
guys all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.